Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, prices of petrol and diesel drop at the pumps. We'll tell you more as more firms are expected to make adjustments today. Also coming up, government vows to maintain needed fiscal discipline to sustain Cedi's good run against the dollar.
It's fiscal. To come to haunt you. It's even social. You suffer, your Ghanaians will suffer haircuts, right? As they did, because you are not able to pay, and you don't expect foreigners alone to do the sacrifice. So Ghanaians will have to do the sacrifice.
Plus, government to borrow 6.32 billion cedis from Treasury market today. We have details coming up. My name is Darryl Carl. Thanks for being with us. We've taken a short break. We're back with some more stories. And thanks for staying with us, everyone. Petroleum product prices have begun to fall at some fuel stations nationwide in the first pricing window of the month. The decline reflects a strengthening local currency and recent drop in the global crude oil prices. Now, more oil marketing companies are expected to follow suit, with Star Oil leading the way. Georgia Afe has more.
Star Oil, which currently controls a significant portion of the market, is selling a litre of petrol at 12 Ghana cedis, 99 pesos. Diesel, on the other hand, is going for 13 Ghana cedis, 99 pesos. Joy Business is learning that if it had not been the price floor directive coming from the National Petroleum Authority, we could have seen Star Oil go down further for the various price codes for diesel and petrol. Another major oil player and market leader, Govt, has told Joy Business that it will be adjusting prices at the pumps from this morning. Most of the firms have linked the reduction to declining prices of crude oil on the international market and the Cedi's recent stability against the US dollar. This is the 6th consecutive decline in prices of petroleum products in the country since February. However, the various transport operators have maintained that these variables are still not enough to warrant a reduction in fares.
Now, the government has assured of its commitment to maintaining the necessary fiscal discipline to sustain the Cedi's recent strong performance against the US dollar. Several factors have been cited for the Cedi stability, including the weakening of the US dollar on the international market. Economic advisor to the president, Cedis, spoke on PM Express Business Edition.
There are other fiscal reforms. The hints of stopping, the haphazard way in which, gold was being handled. From, the mining of the gold itself to its marketing, right, has brought some expectation that things will be moving in the right direction. And I believe I heard the governor talk about, since the measures on gold were announced and actions being taken, the reserves, coming from gold, has started increasing. So we need to, but again, we need to generate forex in very sustainable ways by supporting exports, right? And this is where institutions like the Exim Bank come in, to be able to give loans, to local businesses so that they will be able, to export. And when they export, they earn, forex.
But I am coming to the fiscal discipline bit, because there are some who are saying that there's always a fiscal component, and so what commitment do we get from the executive, your advisory, that the president himself, the Minister of Finance, the fiscals, to ensure that at least we sustain this good run that we've seen since the last quarter of last year to even now?
The president, yes, receives advice, but the president is familiar, very much familiar, with most of the admonitions which Ghana is receiving. I say so because let's remember that this is the president who sanctioned putting money aside, even at dire moments, for us to be able to pay our debt. If you don't pay your debt, it's fiscal, to come to haunt you.
All right, Associate Director at Deloitte Ghana, Dennis Brown, joins me on Zoom to discuss the cedi. Good afternoon to you, Dennis. What's the reason for the cedi's recent good run, and to what extent has the weakening of the US dollar impacted currencies like the cedi?
Hi, I'm Daryl. So good afternoon to your viewers and listeners. I think, so what we're picking up is that the cedi has appreciated, particularly in April. But before that, I think we could tell that from last quarter of last year up to first quarter of this year, it's been largely stable. And that is primarily has been as a result of the foreign exchange reserves that we've had. I think from somewhere in December, the new government, or even in the current budget that was read, we were made to know that we have in excess of about $8 billion dollars in reserves. As at the end of February, that had increased to about 9.3 billion, indicating that the new administration has managed to, boost the reserves further. More recently, we've also seen a stamp of approval from the IMF, indicating that we are on track and we've exceeded some of the targets. We believe that has also boosted confidence in the economy, and that has resulted in an improved external sector performance. So you've seen things like remittances, FDIs, earnings from gold and cocoa all improving, and they're therefore contributing to a stronger reserve. What we've also seen is that over the period that we've seen this stable performance, Bank of Ghana has been quite active in its liquidity support in terms of providing the needed dollars when in demand, not allowing demand to significantly outweigh supply, which primarily causes the depreciation. So let's credit Bank of Ghana for its active liquidity support. But more recently, in terms of the appreciation, it is primarily or largely as a result of the weakening of the US dollar globally because of what's going on between China and US. So they're having their own little trade war over there, and China is picking up certain moves, the significance of which has to do with them offloading their holdings in US bonds. China used to hold in excess of about $1 trillion US dollar worth of bonds, and now it's down to about it's getting close to 750 billion because they are now offloading, and it's having a damping effect on the US market. So those holding US bonds are beginning to find out that the bonds are becoming, for want of a better word, worthless, right? So the prices of the bonds are reducing, and therefore, if you are holding those bonds, it means you are losing grounds as an investor. And that then means that there's the confidence in the US economy is dropping, and that primarily has accounted for the loss in value in terms of the US dollar against its trading currencies.
Yeah.
And emerging markets are benefiting from that.
We just had the presidential advice on the economy sector talk about fiscal discipline and the fact that we're going to put in place fiscal reforms. To what extent is this going to help sustain the cedi stability?
Well, of course, for an economy like ours, right, that is significantly dependent on imports. It's a structure that we've been talking about, that we need to change the structure if we are going to have a sustained period of a stable exchange rate, and to some extent for the exchange rate to also appreciate against its major trading currency. Then we need to shift more towards depending on exports and depending on our local in production to feed ourselves. But that is not something that can happen in the short term. In the short term, we still need to manage an economy with a structure that we consider to be deficient. And therefore, fiscal discipline becomes very, very important, very, very significant. So we are in that type of economy that if you do not prioritize fiscal discipline, you face the harsh consequences. Yes, but also in an economy where even with fiscal discipline, external shocks can hit you so hard, and we've seen some of them. It doesn't matter the level of discipline that you have. This thing that happened to the U.S. Dollar, if it was on the opposite side, which is it gains value, our cedi would depreciate regardless of whatever we are doing internally, because as a small economy we are price takers, and so we do a small economy that is also dependent on the global supply chain. We are price takers, so whatever happens out there, we do either benefit or feel the harsh effects of it. This time we are benefiting, because there's some weakening of the US dollar, but it could as well be the opposite. So yes, you cannot discount the importance of fiscal discipline, because even without it, you may suffer. So the least you can do is to ensure you get that right.
I mean, this good run, for how long? Right as we speak, I'm monitoring the news. China and the US are currently in talks. And so we have to think about how long this can be sustained before we come back to original settings.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a short-term thing. So, those things are going to resolve themselves, and we're going to have to face our own, challenges. I think we all know that if we are going to achieve anything sustainable into the long term in relation to stable, price developments generally, and particularly exchange rates, it is tied to the structure of our economy. And that's what we've been working on. Hopefully, this new administration can get it right in terms of quickly moving on its policies, the 24-hour economic policy, and some of these other import substitution policies that they have planned to significantly change the structure of the economy. It is to the effect that we will now begin to, feed ourselves with a lot of the things that we produce rather than depend on imports, even if we are not exporting that much. So that reduces the extent to which we depend on, dollars to run the economy, and that can usher it into a prolonged period of, stable exchange rate, or generally macroeconomic stability. So it's all tied to the structure of the economy, which I can acknowledge is not something that can happen immediately, but we have to work towards achieving that in the medium to long term.
Yeah, and how does investor confidence play into the Cedi stability? I mean, how do you anticipate investors would react to this, short-termish good performance of the Cedi, if you like?
Yeah, of course, it's going to boost confidence in the economy, because basically what has happened, if you take it from the perspective of international investors, is that they have now found the dollar that used to be the best store of value is not being considered to be safe anymore, and so they are looking for alternatives, and those that have investments here that are probably going to result in risk of capital flight into US dollar will now hold back. There's also the other part where we would experience increase in foreign direct investments because of what is happening to the US dollar, and it's all tied down to the confidence that the investors have either in the US market or now in emerging markets that are looking much stronger. But of course, we expect this to be short-term in nature and will correct itself, and we would have to resort to more homegrown policies to strengthen our macroeconomic fundamentals and further boost confidence in our economy.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you what the government should be doing during these times that we are seeing the Cedi perform so well. I mean, how can they capitalize on this? What opportunities does this bring?
Well, like I said, we expect it to be short-term in nature. The opportunities, let me say first, for the business community would, to expect a positive pricing development. So we are significantly dependent on imports, and it does have a significant effect on our inflation, right? So a huge part of our inflation is dependent on the FX. So to the extent that we are experiencing this stability, and to some extent the appreciation that we've seen in the dollar, if that can be continued, we should expect inflation to drop. Okay, we should expect inflation to drop, and this, will be positive for consumers and businesses alike. It will also impact positively on macroeconomic stability and therefore help businesses to plan better, etc. Further boost confidence in the economy.
All right.
And all of. Yeah.
All right. Associate Director, Deloitte, Dennis Brown, thank you so much for joining us on the marketplace. Enjoy your weekend. Well, the government will borrow 6.32 billion Ghana cedis from the Treasury market today. This will be done through the issuance of the 91-day, 182-day, and 364-day bills. There's more in this report.
The money will be used to settle 6.09 billion cedis in maturing bills. Analysts expect modest yield compression in the coming weeks as momentum builds around the bond market reopening, supported by ongoing preparations. This will consequently reduce the government's domestic interest payments. Data Bank research tips June as the likely optimal timing for the reopening, coinciding with the more stable disinflation path and aligning with the Ministry of Finance's 2-year recovery strategy. In the near term, it anticipates strong demand in the money market, supported by improved investor sentiments. It mentioned that selective debt acceptance should further drive yields lower, enhancing the appeal of long-term issuance to non-resident investors at the reopening. Last week's Treasury auction attracted total bids of 7.27 billion cedis. About 6.7 billion cedis was accepted.
You're watching The Marketplace. We are taking a short break. When we come back, show business. Okay, welcome to Show Business. Time to have a lighter conversation, but a very important one. Today we are discussing President John Mahama's recent comments on boosting the local movie industry. At the launch of the Black Star Experience yesterday, the president announced that only Ghanaian films will be shown on the presidential jet, a policy he first introduced during his previous administration. To unpack what this means for the creative sector, I'm joined, not in studio, on Zoom by culture journalist Kenneth Auchidako. Good afternoon to you, Ken. I'd like to get this out of the way before we start. Ghanaians are asking, where in the world are you?
Darryl, we'll discuss this. We'll discuss this off the camera. I don't know why you're allowing Ghanaians to ask.
Nobody is concerned.
I know it's very important to ask, but yeah, we'll talk about it later.
In the presidential jets, maybe, where there will be Ghanaian films showing, I bet. So, I mean, this directive by the president, purely symbolic, or could it have a real economic benefits for filmmakers?
So this is, in as much as is symbolic, it is something that, if followed through, will be very exciting for the Ghanaian scene. I mean, in a sense, quite a strong, a message about prioritizing what local content actually is. So we all know how much of a pride that the presidential jet is, and so to have the jet that carries the president of the land, talk about the fact that it's going to only exclusively be showing local films. I think it's sort of boosts the visibility that the space has in terms of the international front, and also kind of instill some sort of prestige among filmmakers who are making sure that they portray the culture of their country. And so, Darryl, as you rightly mentioned, in as much as it's quite symbolic, it's also a step towards promoting the industry in a very good way, Darryl.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how this act by the president will help the movie industry. I mean, if it comes to the reasons why our movies are not maybe well marketed or are not doing so well, perhaps it's because of quality, no?
So, of course, the president just mentioning it does not mean that it's just a magic wand that's going to happen. I mean, the industry needs to come together to make this quite a holistic approach, because there are so many challenges that are already bedeviling the industry when it comes to film and the creative sector as a whole, because there's the issue of funding, there's the issue of, modern cinema, there's also the issue of streaming partnerships, which is not talked about enough. So this is quite a very good step if the presidency quite leads by example, where it's something that could pressure other institutions to come together. And in terms of like the various players in the industry, like you can talk about the airlines industry, you can talk about the hoteliers industry, the ministries, the government organizations that are in charge are supposed to be making sure that all of these frameworks work hand in hand to ensure that there's some sort of consistency that follows this directive. And so it's a policy that's, beyond, it goes beyond just the administration, basically. There has to be like real investments that can see the film industry go globally and compete with the other industries that are, up in the industry when it comes to film.
Well, one quick question. Hopefully, I mean, thousands of Ghanaians will follow the president's lead and watch local movies. But the president mentioned, well, this is not new. He did it back in the previous administration. So what's going to change and how would this make a real difference? 1 minute.
This is a critical question, seeing that he is a political figure as well. So we have had various initiatives being started by different administrations and have not been followed through. And so the question of whether or not it's going to be materialized is very important, especially the fact that he also initiated it in 2012. So what makes it quite different is that the initiative is a good step, but back then you would realize that the frameworks, you would agree with me, have increased. There have been a lot more investment by private players and to some extent, the government as well. If you look at the fact that the global in-flight entertainment industry, and connectivity has showcased some growth. I mean, the fact that the compound annual growth rates of 6.38% has been experienced in the global in-flight entertainment industry between 2020 and 2023. And so if we look at that as well, and considering the fact that the market, was valued at some 5.7 billion in 2023, which is expected to grow to about 11.86 billion in 2030, you would understand that there's a lot of money that's supposed to be made. And so in as much as he has, indicated that in 2012, we didn't see much progress, the fact that he mentions it now is something that we should now take very seriously because the frameworks are now there. All we need to do is to ensure that there's a lot more investment to ensure that and see how best it can tie into the current framework, which is the Black Star experience that is also being organized by the government as well. So these are all different ways that the corporate players and then the private sector can also tie in.
All right. Thank you so much, Ken Auchidako, joining us with Show Business. That's it for the marketplace. Thanks for watching. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. The day's latest stories over there. Enjoy your weekend.